I've opened up Adobe Photoshop, and now I'm going to create a new file by going to File and New. Take a look at my settings, particularly the width and the height and the resolution. I've also changed my background contents from white to black by clicking this little box and dragging it from the white down to the black and pressing OK. We'll go ahead and give this a name. I'll call it Exploding Text, and I'll add my username, and I'll press OK. So now it's created a black canvas for me to work on. Next, I'm going to grab my text tool. I'm going to make the font Calibri Bold. You can change the font by coming here and choosing Calibri Bold. 100-point font's probably good to start with, depending on how much you're actually going to write, but also make sure you change your color to white by dragging this to the upper right hand corner so that this shows white. Then I'm going to click here somewhere on my canvas. I'm going to write whatever word or phrase I want to explode. I'm just going to go ahead and do FabLab. Looks like for some reason my font got changed. I'm not sure why that happened, but I'm going to go ahead and reselect the font here and choose the font I actually want to have, which is Calibri Bold. This works well for this tutorial. Now I'm going to grab my Move tool, and I'm going to move the font, and if you notice, these guidelines begin to pop up. When I see that one, I know that I'm centered down the middle of the page. And when I see that, now I know that I'm fully in the center of the page. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I have this text layer selected. And I'm going to add what's called a layer mask by clicking this button down here. And now my layer mask is selected. I can tell by those white borders on the actual layer mask itself. And I'm going to grab my paintbrush tool. I'm going to come up and choose the brush I want to have, which I do that by clicking up here. I already have them selected, but you won't. So go up to the gear. What you're going to do is going to look for the ones called explosion brushes. It'll say, do you want to replace the current brushes? And you can say OK. And you'll get this set of brushes. And what we're going to do is we're going to find one of these brushes. We're going to actually use something like this one to begin with. And I'm going to come over to my window tool, and I'm going to do brush presets, which will turn these guys on. And I can click this one right here, and I'm just going to rotate this brush till I get the round part on the bottom. And what I'm going to begin to do is basically just make the edges of the text look a little shabby here. And I can rotate the brush so that I can hit a little bit more. I can also make the brush bigger and smaller by using my bracket keys. The bracket keys are the ones that are next to the P key on your keyboard, underneath the plus key. So I'm just sort of going around and making this look a little shabby. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and come back when I've finished doing that. I want to talk for a brief moment about what I'm actually doing here. A layer mask sits on top of your layer. And if you look really close at this thumbnail here, what it's doing is any place that I have painted in black. So I was painting with black with my paintbrush. You can see it on the little thumbnail. It makes this writing disappear. It makes this layer go away anywhere there's black. So basically what's happening is I'm just cutting into this white text, and what you're seeing is the black background that's underneath. The next step is to grab a different brush. I want to get one of these very scattered looking brushes. And we're going to make sure that we still have black selected on the top color here. And remember, I can use the bracket keys to change the size. And I'm basically just going to start painting little black specks inside my text. I'm going to vary the size and shape so it doesn't look too obvious that I'm using the same brush over and over again. And at some point I might even change the actual brush itself to get different kinds of patterns and different size of little flecks. So I'll go ahead and pause and come back when I like what I see. So I've added quite a bit of damage to my text, and I'm making sure that I'm trying to make sure that I don't see many of these sort of straight lines like I see right there in the F. So I'm going to come in here and try to break that up a little bit. It just sort of destroys the illusion. But once I like what I see, I'm going to actually come down here and we're going to switch with this little arrow right here. Oops. I'm going to Control Z that. Didn't mean to do that. I skipped a step. What I should have done first was make a new layer down here. And I'll just call this dust. And now I'm going to switch those colors so that the white is on top. And now I'm going to use very similar brushes. And I'm going to add little white flakes around my text to look like the pieces that have been blown off the text itself. And I'm going to continue to vary the size of my brushes so that things don't begin to look too uniform. But these little white flecks are basically what's been shattered off of the text itself. That's probably going to be a little too much, but let's just see what happens. And of course the problem is I see that very stark black line right there, which isn't going to do it for me. So let's go ahead and continue. I'll pause the video and I'll come back when I like what I have. If you haven't already, you need to download and save the file that's on Jupyter Grade. And we're going to go ahead and open that file up by going to File, Open. And I put mine on my desktop in a folder called Exploding Text. It's called Crack Texture. And so it's going to open up an entirely different file. It's going to be tabbed here so I can go back and forth. And I'm just going to go ahead and add this to this one by grabbing my move arrow, clicking and dragging from the actual texture here, and I'm going to bring it up until I have that other tab selected, and I'm going to bring it back down. It's going to say whatever. You can say yes, and it's added that cracked texture, which I'll go ahead and I'll name cracked texture over here, as a new layer on top of everything, which sort of blocks out everything I have going on. I'm going to move that text under, or that layer, that texture rather, underneath my dust layer, and I'm going to right click on it and tell it to become a clipping mask. And what that does, it's applying this layer only to the FabLab text layer. So it's basically only putting itself as a texture onto that text. And it adds this sort of textured feel to the actual words themselves. You might have noticed already that sort of the white specks we created as the exploded pieces are actually still white. So let's go ahead and fix that. I'm going to come over here to my Layers tab, and I'm going to drag this layer down onto the New Layers button and let go, and it creates a copy of this layer. I'm going to bring this layer above the dust layer, which is going to do this, and I'm going to right click on it and tell it to become a clipping mask. And you can see the difference now if I turn this layer on and off. So now it is clipped down to the dust layer, so the dust is now has that same texture as the text itself. I want to add some more debris around the edge of the picture itself. So there's another file that you should have downloaded from Jupyter called Space Dust. So I'm going to go ahead and do the File. We are going to do Open, and it's called Space Dust. There it is, basically just a star field. And once again, I'm going to get my Move tool. I'm going to grab the actual layer itself. I'm going to come over to my main document and bring it down. I'll press yes. And you see that it's not actually as big as the whole document here. It only covers up like the sort of the top quarter of it. I'm going to press Control T to open up my transform. And we'll go ahead and basically just move this thing, make it bigger. Just like that. I'm going to go ahead and create a smart object from that by right-clicking on the layer and choosing Create Smart Object. And now, up here where it says Normal, this is called the blending mode, and that's how this layer is interacting with all the other layers. And I'm going to change it from Normal to Screen, and that's going to allow the rest of my document to shine through. Next, I'm going to come up to the Filter menu, and I'm going to go to Blur. I'm going to choose Radial Blur. I'm going to change the blur method to zoom, the quality to best, and we'll set the amount to 7. And and press OK. And if you take a close look, what it looks like, these particles are actually flying away from the text themselves. Now, as a final step, I'm going to come down to my copy of the cracked texture, the one that's sitting on the top. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to come down to the bottom here. I'm going to add what's called an adjustment layer. And I'm going to choose gradient map. And it's going to immediately change what's going on. And I'm going to come up here and choose from several different templates here. Doesn't really matter, I can change it in a minute. And now I'm going to change its blending mode from normal to one called soft light. And it's going to affect sort of the color scheme of the entire document. And I can come back here and continue to change the templates until I find one that I like. I think I like that one the best. So now that I've created my exploding text, I'm going to go ahead and save as. It would be a really good idea to save it as a Photoshop file first, this .psd file. And what that does is it preserves all of this layer information, everything, and it could be reopened inside of Photoshop and it can be worked on. Once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and export it as a PNG by clicking Export As. I'm going to go ahead, I have my format set at PNG. I'm going to click Export, and it will save it as a PNG file, which will be much smaller. And what it's going to do is going to smush all these layers down into one flat picture that can be opened on any computer. And that's the file that you will eventually turn in.